Hello, hello, and welcome to Advancing Racial Equity, Turning the Page. Now here I am fulfilling my daytime television dreams and ambitions, because look at this wonderful view we have. We are in the heart of London's financial district, where one could argue most of this work needs to be done, but that's a conversation for another day. Now, like curry goat and roti, ackee and saltfish, Jamaican patty, we are grouping together a wonderful in-studio audience here and you amazing people at home. Now, what I'm going to ask for those of you who are tuning in virtually, if you can, just drop in the chat and let everyone know where you're tuning in from. And in the meantime, just to give you an idea of just how global this conversation is, let me just tell, mainly for the audience here actually, where we have people joining from. We've got Winnipeg, Toronto in Canada, we've got New York, we've got Washington, DC, we've got Denver, Colorado, we have San Francisco, we have Houston, Texas, we have Argentina, we have Barbados and Jamaica in the house, and of course we have the UK, we have France, Germany and Austria, we have the Netherlands, we have Estonia, we have Kenya, we have South Africa, and we have Australia. Now, the theme for this year's conference was all about empowerment, and that was my way of just pausing the conversations for a moment about what's wrong and what we know needs changing, particularly in the world of work and in the business landscape. And instead, I wanted to focus on us. Those of us who are most impacted by systemic racism, those of us that care, and really start to open up conversations around opportunity. Specifically, what is it that we can do with who we are, with what we have at our disposal, within the companies that we're part of, or the communities we call our home, so we can do whatever we can to improve situations for others, but also for ourselves, having equity at the heart of everything. So I will be your host for the day, and throughout you will hear from our global speakers who are all coming here in person, bar one person who we'll hear from shortly, to inspire and motivate and give their views of the world. And I hope that they inspire you long after we close the film for the day. So I think that's enough from me for now. So I'm going to get ready to jump on the stage for our first panel. Are back. So thank you so much for joining for our very first panel with our two very special guests. So I'm going to say nothing more because I actually want to let them do most of the talking, which I know is going to make a small change for me, but I promise I will say very little in this panel. I'm just going to be asking the questions of you both. So I would love to introduce Kudzia, who is I didn't even prime them for the clap, I just want that noted. So Kudzia works for the TUC and is head of equality strategy, is that right?
Equalities and strategy.
Equalities and strategy, thank you. And then we have the amazing Christian, who is joining us all the way from the US. And Christian is the founder and president of the Amazon Labor Union. So we're going to get into some conversations because I know there's a lot of people who are going to be interested in what you both have to say. So Chris, I want to take you back to March 2020, if I may. Now there's a lot of people who don't know your story. So as almost part of you answering this question, can you tell them your story? Because the fact that you've been in the New York Times, I think the Washington Post has written about you, anyone who's anyone has written about what you managed to achieve, because there would be a lot of people who said what you did and what you continue to do was impossible. Yeah. So could you tell us your story?
Yeah, I'll give you a short version for sure. So when the pandemic started, I worked at Amazon since 2015. Came in entry level. I was a supervisor for 4.5 years. I opened up 3 buildings in the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. JFK, Staten Island was my last facility. Because I led a walkout, me and my brother, Derek Palmer, who's in the audience as well, Vice President of the Amazon Labor Union, we took a stance because Amazon failed to protect us. You know, while we were shipping out PPE, we were in the warehouses not receiving it. And as a supervisor that spends 40 to 60 hours with these people, I felt that, you know, they're my extended family. So how can I just sit back and not speak up for them? When I led this walkout on March 30th, 2 hours later, the company terminated me over the phone. So my life changed forever. We, my brother Derek and other Amazon workers from New York, we decided that we're gonna form our own independent labor union at the building that I was terminated at JFK Staten Island that represents 8,300 members. So we began our campaign in April of 21. I stayed outside of a bus stop outside of the building for over 300 days, hot, winter, cold, rain, shine, 100 degrees, freezing temperatures, but we stayed out there every day connecting with the workers, building, educating, and on April 1st of 2022 last year, we became the first union in American history.
Why do you think it's so important for colleagues to come together, to use their voice as a collective to speak up in the workplace?
I work for the TUC. We represent 48 unions and 5.5 million workers, and it's really important that we stand together and we stand collectively. You know, workers carry this country and your country and across the world through the worst crisis, you know, in peace times. And it's really important that that recognition of what people did and the impact the worker has is recognized and is rewarded appropriately. And we know that doesn't happen. We know it's not happening. We know that's why we're in dispute. But we also know that our strength is collective. Our strength is in a union, and whether that's a self-organized or whether it's, you know, an official union, the fact of the matter is by banding together, by working together, by focusing on the issues that do affect us all, pay, conditions, our terms of service, what we're being asked to do and being, you know, appropriately rewarded for that are issues we should all get behind and we should all back. And let's be absolutely clear, employers, the government have an aim, and that is to divide us on that. They want to pit teachers against railway staff, they want to pit hospital staff against delivery drivers, but the reality is we're all in it together, and one of the key ways for us to be in it together is to collectivise.
One of the questions I would then like to come to is, there are many, many employees, colleagues, all over the world actually, and the UK, who recognise they don't have what I call positional power within a leadership position, but they're worried that if they start to come together as a group and speak out, that they will be penalised, they will be retaliation, a little bit like what you experienced, Chris, but I would say that's on a different scale, if I'm really honest. What advice would you give them in terms of being prepared and just thinking about what it is that they're trying to do and why they need to do what they need to do?
So, you're absolutely right, Shereen. And what makes it really sad is not only are you right, that is actually what happens. We know that workers are penalised. We know workers are pushed out. We know that if you are black, you are more likely to be, if you get past the recruitment process, you're more likely to be dismissed. If you get, you know, if you survive that, you're going to be policies applied to you in a way that they aren't applied to other people. And there is this whole other system you have to navigate just to succeed at work. So to go beyond that and to be able to actually stand up, have a voice, have an opinion is incredibly important. And the way for us to push back against that is, one, we have to put a marker in the sand and we have to say we saw that, we know that happened, that cannot be allowed to happen again. And we have to talk about it and we have to be honest about it. And one of the things we're doing is we're going to be giving evidence to the COVID public inquiry about the government's mishandling and the disproportionate impact on black workers, because that has to go down, right? And it has to go down as something that happened and something that was designed to happen. We're not here accidentally. Shereen talked about structural racism. This is what structural racism writ large means. But our power is in collectivism, right? And it was collectivism and our ability to band together that meant we did get a furlough scheme, right? That we did get schools closed to most children when it was deemed unsafe for the staff to be in there or the infection was going to pass on. And we have to remember that we do have those wins when we make our voices known and make them loud.
There will be many parts of conversations that you need to have. Some may be easier, some may be more difficult. But we're not going to make anything better by passively sitting back. I just don't see that happening. So I guess I'm acknowledging that maybe parts of this conversation may feel uncomfortable for some people, but kind of as both Christian and Kudzia said, this is the world of work, and this is the future that we think is coming is already here, right? And we can see that every time we turn on the news.
Well, good. They're supposed to feel uncomfortable. You know, that's exactly right. You know, this is an uncomfortable conversation, but it's a necessary one. You know, this is one that people don't have because they feel like, you know, we're trying to put the company out of business or something. You know, that's the narrative that was created for us, you know, that we're low-skilled workers. You know, when managers get hired, guess who's training them? The entry-level workers. So understand, we are the rich people, the workers, and we are very underappreciated, undervalued, and society has built a system that was never meant for us, especially Black and brown people. So yes, it's going to feel uncomfortable, but we have to have these conversations at home with our neighbors and understand the bigger picture. They have a plan. They have a real clear-cut plan, and they have resources and money. We don't have money. We only have people power. That's how we was able to defeat $1 trillion company. No amount of money in the world can calculate love and solidarity and caring for one another. That is free.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That is a brilliant place to finish. All right, we are going to throw to a very quick break, and then, yeah, you'll see me in a couple of minutes. I've spent the last 2 years of my time, my energy, trying to make people see my experiences and maybe not understand, but acknowledge the presence of racism. Turning the page is about doing things on our terms. For over 400 years, we have been seemingly unable to navigate this. It's our time now. And welcome back. Well, that was a conversation and a half, and I've just jumped into the virtual chat very briefly, only to see the rapturous virtual round of applause for Chris and Kudzia. So without further ado, let's go to our next speaker, Tommy. Over to you.
The data shows that the commercial use of the image, likeness, labor, and endorsement of Black culture generates an average of 15 trillion for the global economy every single year. So now that we have a numerical context, how do we empower the world to consume Black culture ethically? Well, this answer lives at the intersection of DEI and sustainability. It's important that we move from addressing this problem through the lens of racial equity, because it's bigger than that. And unfortunately, people are tired of talking about racial equity today, which is why Shereen Daniels and this amazing conference is so essential and so important. However, I'd like for us to look at addressing this problem through the lens of ethical trade, which is a sustainability matter, which involves creating shared value between companies and the communities they extract from in service of economic activity. As a community organizer, we started to address this problem first by incubating this idea through the community, conducting a series of research interviews from private and public stakeholders to shape what could a cultural certification actually look like. What must it cover? What must it govern? What are some of the provisions that it must allow for? What are the attributes and standards of culture that are commercialized? So I'm pleased to tell you that now, for the first time, we have a kosher symbol for Black culture, and it's called the Black stamp. And the Black stamp is a trust mark for ethical trade that verifies when Black culture is commercialized, three things happen. First, creators and supply chain contributors are acknowledged and given credit for their contributions. That's so important because so much of systemic racism is about original people being unseen. And oftentimes the average consumer has no idea the hands and the creativity that went into creating a product that we consume every day. The second thing that it verifies is that equitable compensation happens that takes into account the intrinsic value of Black culture's influence on consumerism. It's important that our creators and supply chain contributors are paid equitably and paid royalties. So Web3 allows us to do that. And the final piece of the criteria that's verified is that a portion of the revenue from the commercialized product are reinvested back into core areas that improve the condition of Black culture. We have to acknowledge and understand that culture is an asset. It's an intellectual property. And like any asset, any intellectual property, it must be protected. And this is the work, and this is the opportunity that we have to call forward all brands that are commercializing culture and give them the opportunity to show proof of their ethical values. I am beyond excited to not only support this movement, but as we think through this conference about what are some of the things that you can do to consume Black culture ethically, it starts with demanding and asking questions of the brands that you are consuming. How are they showing proof of their commitment to anti-racism? How are they showing proof of their commitment for economic reciprocity? It starts with a simple question. And then lastly, for creators, influencers, inventors, artists, designers, engineers, I would encourage all of you to Black stamp your creative works.
Thank you so much, Tommy. Can we just give him a round of applause? Now, Tommy, I don't want you to go anywhere just yet because I do have a couple of questions for you, but I guess I want to just violently agree with what you've just talked to us about today. Tommy, what inspires you to keep going?
15 trillion. 15 trillion is exactly what is owed in reparations. 15 trillion is what the commercialization of Black culture generates for the global economy every year. But 15 trillion is a mentality of not working in individualism, which is an illusion of power, but working together.
Tommy, thank you so much. I think we're all going to just hold that number 15 trillion in our minds. I think we should all just write it in big letters in our notepads.
Yes, indeed. It's important.
It's an important number. So thank you so much for joining and streaming live from your home today. As always, I really appreciate listening to you, and yeah, you just help me keep going. So thank you so much for that.
My pleasure, Queen. Best wishes in all you do, and we're here together.
And now we are going to move on to our next talk on emerging technology.
Hi everyone, I'm Kafaya and I'm here to talk to you about Web3. How ready did you feel stepping into the third stage of the internet? How does blockchain technology, artificial intelligence, decentralization, NFTs, the metaverse, how does that all sound? I'm sure you guys are hearing words like this all the time now. And Web3 is in such infancy right now. It's such an early stage and there's so much development to come. But when it's in full swing, it's going to be a major, major game changer. Okay, I always get often asked questions about Web3 and a lot of people feel like it only affects them if they're in a crypto space, if they're an investor, but that's not true. But let's take a step all the way back to Web 1, where it all began. So Web 1, 1991 to 2003, super static web. You guys know Craigslist, Wikipedia, a very Web 1 world. But going on to Web 2, where data is so important. Big companies like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, what they do is they have your information. They know so much information about you, you'll be surprised. And what they do is they do targeted ads because it's very lucrative, and security, lack of privacy, things like this. You'll be surprised all the information is out on you on the web. Going on to Web 3, where we've gone from a centralized world and moving it more to a decentralized world. Web 3 will be trustless, permissionless, and it will allow organizations to just not necessarily be closed down by big corporations. It will go to a stage where people that hold tokens will have says. It won't be the CEOs and the presidents, and it couldn't be shut down by something like Facebook. So we are very early stages, but people should really take a chance on innovation. When you look at how far we've come and how far we can go, we're just in the beginning. So Web3 is going to create a lot of freedom, a lot of creativity, and everyone wants to be free. I find it really frustrating that people are not even willing to learn about crypto. Do research. Fair enough, it may be a bear market, and fair enough, you're seeing things on the news, but why not get into the space? Why don't you find out what things are going to affect you in this world, the development behind some of these projects? You don't want to just put your money somewhere and you don't understand it. That is fair enough, but definitely do some research to understand. Also, just being around people that are in the space could help. So you can maybe ask questions, find out what's going on. You don't want to miss your window and completely miss out on all the opportunities that are around. So definitely research now so you don't miss the whole bubble and be like, why didn't I get in when I had a chance?
Prostate cancer is a real danger for the black communities. So 1 in 8 men will have prostate cancer in their lives, but it's 1 in 4 black men. Double the risk. And therefore there are men that are dying unnecessarily because they're either not aware of the risk or alternatively they're not well served by our healthcare system. If we do nothing more today, I would ask you, if you're a man over the age of 45 or a relative or a friend, please ask men to go onto Prostate Cancer UK risk checker and check their risk. And if you go away with nothing else, please go away with that. So that's why we're here. This is really important to us, but we don't pretend to be experts at all. We've got a long way to go. So over to my questions. I've sort of talked why I'm here, but I'm also interested as to why Belle and Tyrell are here. And particularly, I know we're trying to amplify our advocacy efforts to achieve the best, greater progressions. So why are you here, and what else can we do to advocate harder and better?
I'm here today because I feel like the much needed conversations don't go forward as much or as common as they need to, especially with the types of people that they need to go forward with. I feel like there's a lack of advocacy on behalf of young people. I feel like young people from the age of adolescence aren't actually properly prepared to even well represent themselves when they get to an age where they need to speak about certain issues. So I'm here to speak on behalf of myself, on behalf of other young people who would like the ability or the opportunity, to speak but aren't here today, and the ones who don't know how to represent themselves but are struggling through life and need these issues amplified. I refer to you guys as the wise generation, right? That's respectful. I think that's right, respectful. Right? That's really respectful. So the wise generation, you have the skill set and the resources to be able to facilitate and package up our voices, our expressions and our opinions. I would suggest if you want to really go about advocating for this subject at hand, we should have young people like myself voicing opinions and perspectives and sharing our experiences like how I just have, packaging that into like a report type of document where we can title it The Negative Impacts of Poor Social Equity on Young People. And that report there, I feel like, can then be pushed into the political sector and especially championed by politicians of colour to talk about the impacts, the negative impacts that it's having on our young people when they're seeing poor social disparity amongst our economy, and how much it's acting as like a form of disempowerment, how much it's acting as a barrier to stop young men and women like me from thinking that we can operate in certain industries. And I think when that argument is there, especially amplified by young people themselves, if we're actually going about bringing a fairer future for our young people, I feel like that is the attention and the document, and then it being pushed in the place where it needs to be pushed the most, if we actually really want to go about bringing the changes that we want to see.
Fantastic.
All the successes that we had started with a conversation, started in rooms like these where people talking about what was being experienced and translating that into policy. And people hate politicians, and I understand why. But there are those of us that really do want to see real change, and if we are to be true representatives, it's important that that change comes from the people in our communities. So I'm here because I think it's important to have these views, but also to listen to what's being said, to engage with the different discussions are being had, and make sure that forms the policies and the legislation that we have in Parliament, because that's the only way that we're going to deliver for the entirety of society. We've seen reversals of all of the major gains that we've made. And then when we hear mostly about the civil rights struggle in the US, mostly because of some very great Hollywood films. But the reality is we had a strong civil rights struggle in the UK. And there are a lot of things and actions and individuals that were involved in bringing about the racial equality we have, but there's a lot now being done to drive it back. So I'm thinking about race and immigration, a points-based immigration system, the Rwanda deportation scheme, the scrapping the recommendations from the Windrush report, what an absolute disgrace. So these things are rolled back. Crime and policing, the Policing, Sentencing and Courts Bill, that which is obviously going to target Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities more. Education, a resistance to teaching Black histories in schools. The BLM, most recent BLM protest really started again another wave of discussions, but the response to that was the Sewell report, which said that there was no institutional racism, one insult to everybody that does experience it. And I think about secure schools, and these ideas of bringing more police into our schools and how that impacts on young Black boys in particular. We've challenged them as much as we can, but with the current makeup of government, and that is also going to be impacted by changes to our voter registration. Voter registration, which will now require a certain level of ID, which will definitely, again, target those communities of colour which are less likely to have these particular forms of ID. Race Equality Act that actually means something, and just doing away with some of these really awful pieces of legislation, understanding that things like immigration have always been synonymous with race, so if we're not going to tackle things like that, we're not going to change.
Thank you. And I think, Tyrell, if I was sat in apparently I'm a wise generation person rather than but I think if I was sat in your shoes listening to some of the things that Belle's just described, I think I would find that all a bit hopeless, actually. So I just, how do you keep positive, and what's your thoughts on what's going on?
Excuse me for not really having too much faith, and even if we do come out with new legislation, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's even going to be lived up to or upheld. So literally, that's my kind of view on this. I would like to see a lot more positive legislation come out, especially in regards to young people, because I really believe they're fully capable of leveling up our society and ultimately are responsible for taking over a lot of you guys' businesses and a lot of you guys' sectors in the future. I'm quite surprised that you guys haven't got your hands in the basket already trying to pick out the best ones. We're literally going to be carrying forward a lot of these corporations, so I would look for, away from just legislation, a lot more interaction between businesses and young people to see how we can transition young people smoothly into different sectors and just get them to feel comfortable. And in that way, it can be another approach to reducing social disparity across our economy now.
So thank you very much both for your time. Really appreciate it. And I believe we're going to a break.
I am a black man over 50 with a strong family history of prostate cancer. If you can identify with any of these factors, then please take Prostate Cancer UK's 30-second online risk checker.
So I'm really excited to be part of the partnership between Prostate Cancer UK and Rotary Watches to design a new watch to support the work that Prostate Cancer UK do, and it's going to be called the 1 in 4 watch, represent the fact that 1 in 4 black men or men of Afro-Caribbean heritage will be diagnosed with prostate cancer.
And we are back. Now, at the risk of sounding like Wendy Williams, because I'm just going to give the camera technicians a little bit of a headache, I do want it noted that part of the brief for being on this panel was that everyone had to wear trainers. There is no shoe cam. However, I just want it confirmed that we all clearly got... Listen, I don't know how that happened. It's amazing. I love it. So I think we're starting off this panel really well. So I'm going to welcome you, Isabella, Clara at Oyinkansola. What is the impact that you would love to have on individuals that is talked about in 10, 20 and 30 years' time?
There's a lot of research that's gone into this, and at the moment in the UK, I think just under 8% of all engineers are ethnic majority, global majority. And when you drill down into that statistic, only 1% are black.
No way. Can we just say that one more time?
Yeah. 1% of engineers, all engineers in the UK are black. And that is not a dissimilar figure for women of colour like myself, brown women. And that's a real massive problem, because if you think that literally engineering and technology is everywhere around us, it is the infrastructure that our very societies are built on. And if we don't have people that represent the societies that those engineering and technologies are supposed to serve, it's not going to be inclusive, it's not going to work for everybody. And so it's really, really important that we diversify the industry. And then personally, I think we spend a lot of our upbringing trying to make our parents proud of us and trying to do what our parents expect of us. And actually, I think we, this chestnut that I love, I've said it so many times, but I love it, we spend all that time trying to be dutiful descendants, and actually what we should be doing is trying to be amazing ancestors.
That's great.
To fix those issues for our young people coming up. And that is what I want my legacy.
So extra. Sorry, Isabella. I love that. I just had to sit with it for a minute. I had to let it marinate. Love that.
That's what I'd like my legacy to be, for people to know that we played a little part in making that journey for you easier.
And I'm just, sorry, because I love that so much. Can we just talk about this for a little minute? Right, good ancestors. Because that is this whole idea of the ancestor piece has been built today, now, with everything that we do. You all made a decision to be here today. That's part and parcel of trying to make a difference just by being maybe in different arenas that you wouldn't ordinarily have found yourself in, listening to conversations that you wouldn't ordinarily have been part of.
Privilege is worldwide. Privilege looks different because it can be race-based, it can be sex-based, but it's still privilege. So men are definitely still in a lot of positions of leadership. There are not a lot of women who are in positions of leadership or have power to influence policy, to influence hiring decisions and so on. I feel like patriarchy is the enemy, and patriarchy is the biggest thing, is the biggest problem. So being seen as less than, having to deal with institutional issues around that. And I'll also say that with the history of colonialism, still race is an issue, right? It's the idea that a white person can come to Kenya and start a business and get funded better than I can, or get opportunities that I will not have. It is that they would be seen as subject matter experts on our lives, which is wild. And those are the same kinds of things. I think that one of the most interesting things about, like, especially being a student of the world and history, is that a lot of the struggles are the same, right? It's still colonialism, which is racism at play, which is still what affects how trade is done, which affects how economies are built, which affects the opportunities that are given to people still in Africa, which is still the same problem that you have here. It's wild. We're all interconnected, and so the struggle and the resolution is still in that interconnectedness. So it's talking to each other about how we can help each other, using our privilege, right? So people will listen to me because I'm a CEO, I've worked at great companies, and it's up to me to use that privilege to better the situation rather than just like rest in it. What's the point of power, I feel, if you don't exercise it?
What is some of the advice that you would give to people who are either aspiring to be leaders? And when I say leaders, I mean like they want the job title, and they want to be directors, they want to be CEOs, they want to be in the C-suite, but they're also worried about either being the token hire or being the only one. So there's always that part about, can I cope? Like, I'm really ambitious and I really want to progress, but I'm just tired of being the only person who looks like me on that board, even though I know the board have tried to roll out the red carpet to tell me that I'm welcome, but I don't believe it. Not that anybody does that, of course they don't. But what would you advise?
There's three things that comes to my mind as you were asking that question. I think I would like to piggyback off what Clara was saying about literally opening the door ajar. If I was to, come out of my entrepreneurship life and actually pursue a corporate career, the first thing I would do before accepting the offer is for the company to be open for me to bring a strategy that opens the door for other people in my space so that I'm not just a token person. And that strategy would also involve how do we make sure that we're upskilling people from junior all the way to, it bothers me when I go to corporate places and the cleaners and the servers are black, but then you look at the top and the top is full of white people. That bothers me. So for me, it would be actually, how can we get those cleaners to be juniors by the next 3 years? How can we get those junior people to become mid-level in the next 2 years? And how can we get those mid people to become seniors so that I'm not the token person, and so we can actually see true equity. And equity is not just a conversation, but it's actually something that actually happens. So for me, it would be actually doing something disruptive by building a strategy that opens the door.
I want to say something. So she's coming in, doing her job, and thinking about how to better things. That's like a double burden. And it's not her burden to carry, right? Because she's not the only person in this company that needs to worry about this stuff. Toni Morrison says that racism is a distraction, and that is the distraction right there, right? That she has to think about, what does the future look like? How do I bring in other people that look like me? When white people have to come in and just do their job. Isn't that amazing that she has to think about that?
We have 4 goals and 1 purpose, making amazing happen for a better world.
We have partnered up with the awesome people at RF to make amazing happen for a better world.
Pioneering new sustainable products and solutions, championing diversity and inclusion, and inspiring the next generation of engineers and innovators.
All these people are inspiring me to do better, and even if I fail to stand up again, it really brightens my soul.
We know we have the power to drive positive change for our environment, our people, and our communities.
I do just want to emphasise this point about discomfort, because I know it came up in the virtual chat. My middle name is Tough Conversations, and I think this is what we have to continue to have. I'm so pleased that you're enjoying the conversation, and I'm also gratified that you feel like it's challenging. So without any further ado, we're going to go into our next panel, the power of brands.
We are here for the next 30 minutes. We are going to be talking about the power of brands. My name's Rita Lloyd, and I'm a storyteller. You can find my work on platforms like Vice, Gay Times, and TED. I'm also a strategist, and I've worked across brands like Amex, ASOS, and Sony. I'm joined by 2 brilliant panelists today. We have the brilliant Nick Croucher, who is lead partner at Fraser Jones. And we also have Elfried Samba, who is Chief Community Officer at iOconic. In terms of sort of engaging black communities, you know, we're talking about connecting those dots. What can we be doing, you know, as brands? You know, what can major brands be doing and people within major brands be doing to get that right?
So there's a little bit of PTSD that comes with, first and foremost, brands approaching black people, people of color, because for the most part, the advantage or the long-term value is always favored on one side. It's almost like you rent the culture, but you don't want to keep it and all parts of it. So for the most part with businesses, it's all about having an authentic reason for wanting to engage in the first place, or for wanting to help in the first place. It's all about wanting to leave a mark and leave the world better than where we found it, right? So first and foremost, it starts there, right? And why are you doing it in the first place? And then when you start to approach people of color, black people especially, you have to approach it with a very authentic lens, right? You have to approach it in a way when you're looking to understand, you're willing to make mistakes, you're willing to have an open conversation, because for the most part, one thing I learned about creating teams, and never mind, before you even get into the conversation about racial diversity, when you start small, you need a round table of people that have different walks of lives and different perspectives, right? That's actually a sound strategy to become a very tangible business. And as you grow, and you become a business with 1,000 people, you often have one perspective, which is the boss and the person that signs it off. That already happens naturally. Now, if you want to be able to give yourself a fighting chance to, one, have that initial startup buzz and then maintain it as you grow bigger, it's actually more important, not just morally, but even as a sound strategy, to seek to branch out and step away from what is familiar and comfortable.
Some of my more recent work has been in front of the camera and presenting and modelling, and the campaigns that I've been working on, I've been really surprised at the sheer range of difference. And I'm talking about major high street brands, where on occasion there was one particular shoot last year where all of the talent, all four of us, were black and Asian women of colour or non-binary people of colour. All 30 to 40 people on set every day were cis-het white people, with the exception of maybe one white gay guy. And that just fostered this environment. And the brand is a really well-known, ethical, global high street brand. And, you know, it was really, really obvious working on that campaign. Not only were people being misgendered and being patronised quite generally, which made us kind of close up, so it didn't produce the best results, we didn't have the best experience, but also, it's, you know, we're not stupid, we know what's going on there. All the beneficiaries of our work are actually not us. Not to mention that the brand is an ethical brand, which targets our communities and its campaigns and utilises the you know, our motherland essentially and what we have there. But it's like along that value chain, along those touch points, you know, it just feels like the people that are devising the strategies and the creative are not us. And that's really apparent. So how are you finding that there's a difference or a noticeable difference in terms of some of the internal teams within the organisations that you're working in, Elfried, and also Nick? You know, how are you finding hiring decisions changing and shifting?
I think there's been a massive shift change in the employment market over the last 4 to 5 years to identify and hire more diverse talent. The fascinating kind of question back to that is organisations still massively rely on their referral networks. So they go towards people they know or they've worked with before that, guess what, isn't hugely diverse. Or they produce mandates or vacancies that have specific skill sets that require someone who have done the job before. So unless there's a magic pool of talent that's somewhere I haven't found in the 17 years I've been recruiting, we have to look at it more holistically and differently. And I think something we hear a lot in recruitment and search at the moment is culture fit. You know, how do you define that? Do you define that by someone who thinks and acts like you do? Or someone who's going to come in with a completely different view and approach a task differently. So it's as an organisation that sits between the labour market, and it's been fascinating listening to everyone's views today, and then the kind of the organisations who are hiring. It's trying to educate that if you want to access diversity in all aspects, you have to give up some of those skill sets. If someone hasn't been in a FTSE 100 organisation with Remco experience, but they come with a completely different skill set that could transform that organisation, is that worth it? And I think what we're hearing today is absolutely it is, but there's a mind shift change we haven't quite seen yet. I think just finally, I think what we've seen a lot in the employment market is particularly, dare I say it, white boards or white C-suite organisations saying we need to hire a black or brown candidate because we've got a problem with racism or systemic racism in our organisation. It's not their responsibility to come in and fix a problem that existed before they've joined. So it's a fascinating change that we're challenging.
Yeah, 100%. And going back to what Nick said, I think a lot of people talk about culture fit, but what we embodied, because before I was at Iconic, I worked for a company called Gymshark, and what we started to embed into our culture was this whole ethos about culture add, right? Because culture fit is a very closed-minded way of thinking about things. Culture add and purposefully leaning towards people that add to the culture, make it different, give you a world view, especially if you're trying to be a brand that services the audience of tomorrow, today and tomorrow, right? You have to have people that disagree or see things from different perspectives. And I just feel that going back to the whole comment as well of tokenism, and I'm sure that all of us as black people, brown people, people of color have all sat in a seat where a whole organization, especially during the height of the George Floyd murder, when everybody's coming to you and asking you what should the organization do, but anything prior to that, it's almost like your voice was like not worth anything as long as you did your job, right? So I think that people, especially people of color as well, are starting to understand that, right? Now, how do we solve the problem, right? Because as a black man, I'm frustrated by that, because we were just talking before I hopped on the stage that the whole mentality that we have is that we can work our way out of this. If you just outwork everybody, that's going to work. Well, they'll just watch you keep working until you burn yourself out, right?
I think what's interesting is we're seeing a job market massively under scrutiny and challenges with very low unemployment, certainly in kind of corporate roles at the moment. And we've heard a couple of examples today of really talented people exiting the corporate market because they don't either feel that there's a pathway for them or it excites them anymore. And this is something we're going to see in the job market. It's going to have to rebalance to try and bring that talent back in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll say something else. Just off the back of that, because I happen to be a bit of a nerd on LinkedIn, so you get job offers all the time. And my favorite company, I'm not going to name them, but the company and the reason why we're black all the time, and I see the panels joined me in on that. We called each other beforehand and made sure that was the case. But I got like the maddest job offer that you can probably get in the marketing field, the biggest company on the planet. You probably know who that is. And for me, I looked at that opportunity and I said, it's obviously in the tech space. I was like, one, the technology that's utilized to help this company impacts the country that I come from. Right? I'm from the Congo, right? So I'm like, so morally that's not the right thing. And I was like, okay, cool. Now I could make that and that helps me, but then what can I do to be that almost like bat symbol for Alfred when I was 19 years old to also want to take that step, right? And I know that it's a burden and I know that it's difficult, but we have to do it, right? The first people that make change are not like met with like applause and rainbows, right? Like you have to be able to make that step, but it makes it so much easier if it's a united approach as opposed to an individualistic approach. If we start to treat this as a competition and there's only a space for a few of us, then we're not going to win. So we all have to unite together amongst a common goal, and we all trust each other's superpower to get us there.
And also just to say, I really believe that the power within brands is within all of us, because we all work within these brands and we're much more powerful than we realise. So I'll close on that and hand over back to Shereen.
Awesome. What an amazing conversation. And if I may intercept with an even more of a challenge for brands, it's kind of just piggybacking off what Rita said, right? Brands and companies are not sentient beings. They are made up of individuals. And I do think it's about changing the lens in which you look at how you engage with quote unquote diverse talent, consumers, whoever you feel like you're not welcoming in your organisation. But, and here is the but, is that it can't be the way that you think it needs to be done based on what you feel is safe, based on what you feel is comfortable. And potentially for some brands, taking risks means to listen to communities they've previously ignored and actually having the courage to follow through on an action in a way that is in alignment with the feedback or with the voices of said communities. What it isn't about is you taking that and extracting that information and then going, right, well, we like this bit, but we don't like this bit because we think it's too challenging, or that's not really the message that we want to give as a brand, so we're going to spin our own message on that. Then my point with that is you don't have the right to go to those communities. You don't have the right to go to those black and global majority colleagues or potential candidates if all you still want to do is find another way for them to conform, or for you to be able to extract that information from them in a way that suits you. That is how you perpetuate racism if we keep on doing that. So what I am going to do, I've got my magic tablet here, look at this now. So I want to go and just read a couple of the comments that I can see without loading the whole chat, because I can see there's been a lot. I'm going to come to Rosemary Campbell-Stevens, who says here, part of being self-determining is about aligning ourselves with our authentic definitions of what it is to be human. African view of self, Ubuntu, I am because we are. Therefore, I don't need to be paid to turn up black and address the fact that we, us, are not represented. It is my ethical responsibility as a human to speak up and do what I can, especially paying it back and forward to my ancestors past and to the good ancestor that I want to be. Ashe. And then Rashid Thomas says, you rent the culture, but you don't want to keep it. I know Tommy said too much renting going on, way too much renting of black culture. So no, I agree. And Elizabeth Pepito says here, managers don't know how to manage. And I think that's a fair challenge, because they've been allowed to get away with skirting around the issues. And if you think about how much time, energy, and effort is placed on what I call listening to colleagues who are excluded, there isn't enough time, energy, and effort placed on the managers who are not hiring, who are not given opportunities, and or are also blocking progression of colleagues who look like me, who look like you within an organisation. So I think they're all really important and valid points, all under the power of brands, and also partly power of leadership too. So we're going to set up for our next panel, so don't disappear anywhere, because we are coming back.
Good to be here. I'm Folu. I work in creative marketing for some big streamers in the entertainment business. We're here to have a discussion about the power of media in advancing racial equity, and I'm joined on the stage by Tamsin, who is the co-founder of Drummer, and Jen, who is an author activist. So I'd like to ask, in your opinion, what do you reckon are some strategies that could drive or potentially drive that change within the media? And when we say the media, we don't just mean the news and papers. We mean production companies, studios, creative arts, etc., etc.
The only way they're going to change is if they're made accountable. And the problem with that is that it can just be a tick boxing exercise, so you'll kind of have to have a certain number of diverse people on screen and off screen, or you won't get the commission. But you can get round it if you want to. by just putting somebody in a position, they might not even be the right person for the job, and then you've ticked your box and you can move on. It's not going to change until people authentically buy into it and take responsibility for it and see that there's a better product to be made if you do embrace your audiences, basically. And I can see it is changing. I think that some things that have been done with all the right intentions haven't necessarily been a huge success, in the way that you can get Black Takeover Day, for example, which has been really good. There's been a legacy, there's been people who would not have got into the industry if that hadn't happened, but it's only happened. It shouldn't just be one day.
Yeah.
It's a bit like Black History Month. It shouldn't just be, you wouldn't need it if it was, you shouldn't need a takeover day. If you're good enough to present a programme on that takeover day, why aren't you good enough to present it for the rest of the year? Why haven't you got that job forever?
I think a lot of things. I'm just going to be really, really blunt. Listen, I've seen production companies, when there's a pitch, I've seen how quickly they can turn that around. So there is no excuse for me as to why, things are changing. Well, change it now. And the thing is, we are the change. We hold the power. We hold the power of looking someone in their eye, and when you see it and you call it out and look them straight in their eye, they might quiver, they might cry. And it's like knowing your power. It's your white counterparts actually seeing it and calling out there and then. Speaking with HR, for me, it's great to see everyone here. However, there are not enough people, white people here, in positions why are they not here? I have been made redundant and sacked from so many places because I have called it out there and then. I've had white fragility, I've had people cry, I've had it all. But obviously I'm the angry black woman. No, I'm very assertive and I'm telling you all about yourselves and I'm not having it. However, it's not about having a seat at the table. Bring your own table, right, and sit at it. Right, and invite other people to your table. And knowing your power and everything that our fashion, our clothes, everything that we have. Don't let somebody else pimp that out. We are that. And media is a completely, listen, media for me, it's a necessary evil, but know your power and be in control of your heart and your mind, which you are already. And don't let anybody pimp your heart and your ride, because we are powerful.
Can we get some love for that?
I could go on.
Creating content has been democratized and anyone can do it. And obviously I'm talking about social media. And I just wanted to get your take on the impact that social media has as an alternative media source, as a place where, it presents opportunities for Black and global communities.
So I think there's a total place for making your own material and content and putting it out on social media. And not Cargo's different to this, but sometimes you're kind of talking to the converted, or I think it's who do you want to watch your stuff? And nowadays, there's a million different platforms, there's a million different ways of saying it, but if you want to reach somebody, the film that we made for Channel 4 after Jen's statue, some of the backlash came from the White Lives Matter people. Mm-hmm. Well, they wouldn't go and watch something that you put on YouTube, maybe, but they watch the Channel 4 news. So it's kind of like, who do you want to talk to? Mm. So I think there's a place for that completely, but it also has to change within the more established media platforms.
Mm-hmm. And also, just remember, the more people that you are actually upsetting and getting on there, it means the more positive that you're doing. The more people are upset and outraged by your very existence, that it's just like kryptonite. The more people you piss off is the more powerful that you are. I know that every company that I have been in, where I've been either sacked or made redundant, I know that I have made it better, or those employees are going to think twice before they employ a woman of colour. So I'm hoping that I've educated them, because I've told them very plainly. But the thing is, for me, it's about the response. I know not everybody is as outspoken as myself. However, you have to think who's coming in behind you. And if you are silent because you... And I get it, I'm not putting anybody down because it takes a lot of courage. I'm the youngest of 5 boys. But that's where I get that strength from. But, think about who's coming behind you and giving them power and just basically speaking up, because there are people coming behind you who you owe that to, you know? And I'd like to think that's what my legacy is within media, that I think any black woman that is come behind me, that those employers think about me and what they should do and not do and say and not say.
When you get people coming to you, it's a responsibility that we have. People come to you, people who aren't confident enough to speak out will come to you, and you'll kind of have their back and help them, and that's mentoring.
It takes so much courage to speak out, you know, especially when you are the only black person, woman. You know, I was brought up at school, I was the only black kid in my school, so I've been doing this all my life. So going to a media company is like nothing to me. And it takes a lot of courage, and I know not everybody can do it, but there are different ways of doing things, and I just want to empower all my sisters to speak up and speak out, and also my white allies, as my friend Tamsin is here, to, you know, she stands toe to toe with me, you know? So, you know, it's about coming together and creating a powerful force.
Conversation, isn't it? It's about carrying on the conversation.
It's about conversation. So I'm getting the signal. I want to thank you both for being so open, being so passionate. Thank you. We're going to head to a break.
Hi everyone, I'm Dominica and I'm going to be talking about NFTs. NFT stands for non-fungible token, meaning a unique digital or physical asset which was tokenized, put on a blockchain for safety, traceability, and transparency. NFT could be a song, it could be a video, it could be a game, or it could even be a tweet. A musician can have an NFT which was used to authenticate the song that he created, which he then sells to a holder of an NFT. He can have some special features written into the smart contract. It could be some exclusive content which only the NFT holder can see when they open the NFT. And even on top of that, they can further enhance that special application by airdropping extra assets and changing the way the NFT looks to the user. How amazing is that? Another myth about NFTs is that they can be easily copied. Again, not true at all. So NFTs are actually secured by blockchain technology, which makes them unique and unreplicable. You cannot copy the contract behind an NFT. So another myth is that NFTs are just a fad and soon we're going to get bored of them and they're going to disappear. That again is completely not true. Yes, it's a new and upcoming technology, and yes, we're going to see waves of popularity with NFTs. What we really need to think is about the smart contracts, the back end of an NFT. Smart contracts have so much potential to revolutionize industries outside of the art world. Just think about real estate. What you can do if you can facilitate the buying and selling of properties through self-executing contracts, and you don't have to chase anything, it just happens automatically. So one of the biggest misconceptions of NFTs is that artists think they can just create a digital artwork and it's gonna sell straight away and they're gonna get rich and make loads of money. Please don't get into the space thinking that you're gonna get rich quick. The best artists in the NFT space create their communities first, they know who they're gonna sell to, they know what the audience wants from them, and that's where they make the money, and that's where they make the most successful projects. So really research and look at the best artists in the space and figure out how you can do it yourself.
Now listen, I hope you're sitting for this conversation because I want you to pull up a seat. We're going to talk for a little minute. I don't know if anybody's seen that the BAFTAs has been trending for the last 24 hours. I'm not going to talk about the Broadway performers. What's the name of the lady in pink for anybody who's in the UK that knows what I'm talking about? Is it Antonia something? Anyway, that's not the conversation that I want to have. So the BAFTAs for our global audience is the British and Film Television Awards. BAFTAs, yeah, British and Film Television Awards. Happens once a year. And this year's BAFTAs hit the news because all of the award winners were white. And so everyone has dutifully done what they do best, which is basically say what happened to representation, what happened to diversity, etc., etc. I want to add a slightly different angle to this. The conversations do need to be had, but I do think, yet again, we're having the wrong conversations. We've already heard from the power of media, just not only the importance of representation, not only the importance of owning our own stories, but we also can't ignore the power dynamics that happen. So, like, imagine that I was talking to the BAFTAs, right? So I'm going to gift this to them for free. What everyone has to understand is by the time we get to the awards section of anything, there's been a whole lot of things that have happened that have led up to that point. One could argue that by the time you get to that stage, it's potentially too late to be talking about anything other than whoever they've selected. If you were to reverse engineer all of the decisions and all of the things that happened that led to the award night and all of these white individuals winning their awards, and this is not to say that they're not deserving, etc., like I don't need to say that. But what I would be saying is this: if we had to take a bit of a data approach, what I would want to know, if we went right back to the very beginning, is how many stories, and when I say stories, I mean film or television, whatever those creative projects are, how many of those have been commissioned by black storytellers, black producers? Who is holding the purse strings? And if we were to look at all of the films that got produced and got given the green light, I think as the saying goes, what sort of narratives, like where do they fit if we were going to think about genres? Because what we do know is, particularly in this country, there are only certain stories that come from black people that get told. That's not the same thing as the stories that we want to tell. They're two very different things. So what they should be looking at is how many different stories that go against the stereotypes and the trauma porn. So do they allow black stories and black creative ideas to flourish in many, 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 many different genres, or are we still pigeonholed into one or two particular genres? Then when you go, okay, what are some of the budgets that are given to some of these projects to get them off the ground? Is it the same universally? You know, can we start looking at correlations between marketing budgets and production budgets, right? And then imagine that these films get made. Where are they shown? Let's start looking at what's going on where. What is the proportion of black stories within all of this, technically should be diversity, but where do we sit within that? And then what contributes to a film or a project being seen as BAFTA worthy, even to be submitted in the first place, never mind winning. So you go down that trail. And then you go, who are the individuals that make the decisions? And through what lens are they making the decisions? And then you go down that data trail. So the point that I'm making is by the time you get to the end, award nights like what we've seen, at least then, if there are accusations that there is racism involved, which is why there isn't anyone who wasn't white who won an award, the BAFTAs are able to evidence and say, right, if we take you right back to the beginning, let us articulate exactly what we've done, through what lens we've made our decisions, the data that we looked at, etc., etc., etc. Because yet again, we always seem to forget that representation is an output, right? It's a symptom, it's not the cause. And the problem is, the second you go down the line of, well, it's only white people because everyone either comes back and says, well, the white award winners should have deserved their awards, and they probably did or didn't, like we don't know, because again, we don't have the story of how they got there to that point, in what was the criteria, I mean. But also, it keeps reinforcing this idea that black stories, black creative projects are not good enough. And thereby, because they're not good enough, that's why they're not shortlisted. And if they're not shortlisted, that's why they don't win. So I thought it was pertinent, considering the conversation about power of media, to give my tuppence worth, if that's just what I see, you know. And I think the hashtag on Twitter, for anyone who's interested, is BAFTAs So White in the UK. So you can see all of the glorious commentary and racism on display. you're going to join me for a panel side chat with the wonderful Mark from SliderCuts. So, as I said, take a minute, but do come back, because I'm on again in a minute. All right, see you soon.
My name is Mark Maciver. I own the brand SliderCuts. It's essentially a barbershop, but it's a lot bigger than that. I do public speaking. I've written a book. I do mentoring. I mentor, young people. I mentor businesses as well, teaching them all the things around growth. I teach people social media and marketing and just things all around that subject. So it's a subject that I love talking about. My business started off from my bedroom in my mum's house when I was about 13, 14 years old. Just me wanting a good haircut. We couldn't afford to go to the barbershop, so I tried it on myself. Went all wrong, but we still didn't have any money to go to the barbershop. So the next haircut, I did it myself. It went all wrong, but we still couldn't afford to go to the barbershop. So the next haircut, it went wrong, but then slowly after a while, progressively, it started getting better. Then I built up this client list in my area, just people who lived on my road. I was just giving them free haircuts, and I was just, heightening my craft. After a few years, I got this unofficial apprenticeship, you could say, in a local barbershop, where I'd go in there once every week on Sundays and would just, cut my friends there, and the older barbers would watch me. I started working there in and around college, because I was in college at that time. A few years later, or let's say a year later, when I finished college, I started working there full time. After about 2-3 years, I became a co-manager. And the way I became a co-manager was because there were things inside the barbershop that I felt just needed to be done, but nobody was doing it. So as someone who was just working out of a chair, I decided to do things like fix up the barbershop out of my own pocket. Just because I thought, this barbershop would probably be better if it looked better. So out of my own pocket, I'd be like, okay, let's fix up, let's do the floors or the this or the that or whatever it is, right? And people used to say to me, why are you doing it? It's not your shop. And I was just like, well, it just needs to be done. Then I opened up my own shop, and then I started implementing all of these things which I always felt would have made a shop work. And SliderCuts is thriving now. It's about just over 4 years, 4 months since we've opened. We've got 11 barbers working in there. I've got about maybe 11 back-end staff. We've got about 4 young people, which are on a runner scheme that I do, which is the mentoring scheme for the young people who come in on Saturdays. We teach them life skills, they sweep up, they get us food, count money, stock checks, mentor them in their schoolwork and whatever it is they want to go into in life. If they want to do barbering, we'll teach them those things there. If they want to be an electrician, we will help them facilitate that kind of road there, and just mentoring them. And it's going really well.
If there's one piece of advice you would give to anybody who's either thinking of starting their own company, is already running their own company, and they were to never see you again, what would you tell them?
Okay, so 2 pieces of advice I'll give. If you're thinking about opening up your own company, and please take this on, before you open up your own company, go and work in that industry. Do not be too prideful to the idea of working under someone else. I worked under another business for 16 years before I opened up my own shop. I learned so much from people which were experienced and knew what they were doing, and things which they didn't know what they were doing, but I learned from all of that. So if you're thinking about opening up your own business, company, work in that industry. Think about it as a privilege, the idea that someone would pay you to learn the thing that you want to do. So imagine going to shadow someone and they're saying, even if it's sweep up the floor and get us coffee, make sure you're asking questions. Why do you do this? Why do you do that? Work in that industry. And what you might even find is, I actually don't want to do this because this is not actually for me. I don't like it. And you haven't lost any money. So if you're going into it, I'd say go and work in the industry first, shadow, ask questions, pay for courses if it needs be, but learn about the industry you're going into. And if you're already working in the industry, then don't be too prideful to the idea of not stopping, but taking a break and going to learn more about the industry which you're in. Because there's a lot of pride that stops us from growing as businesses, because it's kind of like, well, I can't ask someone. Because even in my situation now, right, I'm this kind of well-known barber, right? And I remember going to do a course on wet shaving. And I remember it was pride, it was me swallowing my pride. Because I remember as soon as I walked into that course, right, I remember someone didn't say it to me, I walked in and someone said, is that Slider? Because they saw it as, you're this super established barber. What are you doing learning something in this course, right? And I remember hearing the person from the side of my ear, and I just kind of walked around, I was like, here we go. But I wasn't well versed in that thing, and that's the reason why I was going in that course. So what I've learned even over the years was just constantly, if there's something I need to learn, I will go there, even if I'm going to someone who may be looking at me thinking, why are you coming to me? Because it's going to benefit my business.
Well, can we give Mark a round of applause, please?
Thank you. Hello everyone, my name is Fadlan, and I'm here to talk to you about blockchain. What is the blockchain? Let's break it down in layman's terms. Think of the word block as the word computer, the word chain as in linked. So the blockchain is a decentralized network of computers that are linked together, whereby all transactions on this blockchain are public. Transactions on the blockchain are trustless. We do not need to trust it because everything is public, therefore is easily trustable. Who knows, maybe by 2030, 2035, the stock market will be tokenized, commodities will be tokenized, and real estate will be tokenized. That's going to change the whole financial game because it's not just about cryptocurrency. In fact, most cryptocurrency are actually crypto assets. These crypto assets are on the blockchain. The blockchain allows for new possibilities in the world of technology, government, finance, legal, design, architecture, real estate, basically infiltrating every single possible corner of human endeavors. Most technological systems are quote unquote a block. They are centralized systems whereby there is top decision makers and everybody else has to follow those decisions. The best examples being centralized applications such as WhatsApp, Instagram and social medias, where we know people can become deplatformed. One of the biggest problems I've found with my peers who are outside the blockchain Web3 space is that as they try to enter this space, they focus too much on price action. The reason why this is detrimental is because when you overly focus on the price of something, you do not focus on the value. The most important takeaway is identifying the applicational use case of how blockchain technology affects your industry and how you can utilize it in your business.
When I first started talking about my experiences of racism and what I felt like organisations and leaders needed to do differently, I remember at the time I always realise there's a common theme. I always get warned. People always warn me to stop talking, to be careful that I'm not too challenging, and I should be, and somebody actually said to me, quote unquote, it can become very dangerous for you to keep talking in the way that you're talking about the subject matter that you're talking about. And a different person also said, is bearing in mind, Shereen, the industry that you work in, and my background is HR, and what they said to me is that a lot of the people that you're addressing this to are white people and they won't take kindly to having racism, quote unquote, shoved down their throat. So the reason why I'm telling you that, because I just want people to know that was the environment, if you like, that was in. And clearly I carried on regardless. However, John was the first CEO to publicly engage with me about this subject matter because we recorded an interview together. And I felt like it was a full circle moment to have John back here with me today. It would be great just to let people know what was going through your mind for you to do what no CEO was doing. No CEO was doing at the time.
What was happening in the moment that you were speaking and George Floyd was killed right on our TV screens is my team were crying out for some ability to be able to talk about what was going on, to actually say enough is enough and make meaningful change. And of course, I'm sitting there as this white middle-aged man, kind of going, okay, well, this is my gig now for the first time ever. What am I going to do about it? And you talked a second ago about people in your orbit telling you to, you know, that maybe your voice was dangerous for yourself.
Yes.
But actually, I think your voice cut through the noise. And for someone like me that was kind of going, well, what do I do next? Is like, I need some help. Is you being so prolific in what you were doing every single day. This message appeared on my LinkedIn feed that it was just important that, one, I got some help, but also it took a step forward. And I feel very glad that you were the person that I went to help with and started to take that step forward. Obviously, it's been 3 years, and it's been incredibly rewarding. I guess we'll talk a little bit about why, but that's why.
If you had to give one bit of advice to CEOs who were either still on this journey but have stalled a little bit, or they're still debating or not whether to dip their toe in the water and actually focus in the way that this needs to focus, what would you say to them?
You know, it's interesting. I was listening to a lot of the speakers today and talking about, just recently we were talking about media and brand, and one of your speakers was saying, oh, I don't see very many white people in the room, and we need white allies to be friends, to speak up, to support. Also, there are more leaders in the FTSE 100 called Steve than there are from any background that is non-white, right? So, and then we've had this conversation about actually the corridors of power are controlled by people who, men and women who look like me.
Yes.
And so, if you look at that as a CEO, whose responsibility is it to actually, one, strategically grow the business, actually to do the right thing by your people, right? It's not your ERGs, it's not the HR department, it's not the people in the engaged people in your team that are willing to give up their own time. It's your responsibility. And you talked a lot about a second ago, well, what do you do when you get challenge that comes up from your team? And as the leader of a business, you have to stand up and talk about why this is important. Yeah. And yes, you might be afraid to put your foot in it, and you might be afraid that you don't understand, but you didn't get the CEO job because you won it in a raffle, right? You got it because you were better than other people at solving problems or overcoming barriers.
The fashion industry was built on the backs of black and brown people. If you take a look at the clothes that you're wearing right now, think about who created them. Your mind might go to a white-owned fashion brand or even a creative director who's also white, whether that's Zara or Gucci. In Europe, at board, executive, and manager level in fashion, representation for ethnic minorities, which is sometimes known as the global majority, is below 10%. But if you look behind the scenes, it's a different story. 80% of the garment workers, so the people who are sewing your clothes by hand often or with a machine, are women of color, and that's globally. Not only that, but the cultural heritages of marginalized communities have often been used as a source of inspiration at best and appropriation at worst, without actually acknowledging the source or giving credit. In addition, imagery that has been used to harm those communities in the past has been packaged as something to sell to dominant groups. However, that's all starting to change. Following the murder of George Floyd in 2020, the fashion and beauty industries faced a reckoning about its history of exploitation and exclusion. In this sense, diversity and inclusion has now become a business imperative. The spending power of that global majority community that I mentioned is now steadily rising, and the combined disposable income of ethnic minority communities in the UK is expected to reach over £3 trillion in 2031 and over £16 trillion by 2061. Companies know that in order to actually tap into those communities authentically, they need to be putting black and brown people in those decision-making roles. With over 300 million people working in the clothing industry and a supply chain that spans across the entire globe, fashion has the huge potential to be a driver of change. The initiatives that I've seen from companies that I think have the most potential for meaningful impact directly address those power imbalances that uphold the industry. They demand transparency and accountability, and they invite people from marginalized communities to the decision-making table. What are some of the hidden ways that the Black community has contributed to the fashion industry, and how have those contributions been erased?
I actually think that contemporarily there isn't anything that contemporary fashion is about that hasn't been influenced by black culture. If you look at sneakers, for example, which leads on to, you know, luxury fashion right now. It was started by, you know, the idea of sneakers being a precious and a valuable object was started in hip-hop culture. So without hip-hop culture, without black kids in urban environments, you wouldn't have Nike, you wouldn't have, you know, by equation, you wouldn't have Pharrell, for example, at Louis Vuitton. So, you know, I really recognize that black culture is the source of contemporary fashion.
Jemma, from a retailer perspective, how do you think that European and white-owned fashion companies can become allies to those people and work to improve access for the black community?
I think allyship really needs to touch every single part of a business. And I think in a corporate organisation such as Zalando, I mean, we need to consider you know, representation within the workforce, in the senior leadership team, making decisions. But I think if I just take a second to double click on representation in terms of brands, in terms of fashion, it goes beyond representation of seeing black models in our marketing campaigns. It goes beyond representation of seeing imagery through our online content. It goes to empowering black communities. And for Zalando, so Zalando is a fashion and beauty platform in 25 markets across Europe. So with 50 million active customers, it's an opportunity, actually a responsibility to leverage an organisation such as this to better represent the black community. And why it's so important for organisations such as this, other retailers as well, is because when you serve so many customers, and when you know your strategies are built around being a customer-centric business, because fashion should be for everyone, you need to be able to represent your customer. I think anyone from any group wants to see themselves reflected in fashion. And if you don't see yourself reflected in fashion, how do you feel connected to that brand or that retailer? So it's important to put yourself in a position where you are connecting with people, with communities, with the black community. So for Zalando, it's really important to onboard black-owned businesses, not just to onboard black-owned businesses because, you know, in 2020, the Black Lives Matter movement was a catalyst for change, and retailers such as Zalando really looked inwards. How are we representing the black community? So it's about ensuring that you're not just ticking boxes, but you're mentoring and you're giving opportunities to make sure that any brand, no matter what size, has the opportunity to come on board so that we can serve a wider audience.
Is it also about visibility? Because I think that while it's great having this perspective, and it's so great hearing what you're saying about your brands, actually equally important, it's for the consumer to understand that they are part of that brand all the way up to the very top, and being able to for them to acknowledge that they're being supportive within that community. And I think that's when we're talking about this perspective on race, what we're talking also, and we don't use that word enough, we don't talk about community. Yeah. And it's about supporting all of us as a community and being very visible, as I said, all the way through. I think that's really important to do.
Yeah, it brings us back to that point about including people all the way through, because when you look at leadership versus sort of the entry level or even this sort of historically low paid and potentially even exploitative roles in the supply chain, that's really where we're seeing the most quote-unquote diversity, you know?
And I really think if we're going to be talking about what decolonisation means, it means...
Yeah, that was going to be my question for anyone who's not aware. Well, it's a big word, you know? Like, what does it mean?
It's such a big word. You know what it means? Reimagining the future. That's what it means. We can think about things in a very different way. And when I think about education, oh my God, just opening those doors and having a very different perspective, challenging challenging what is known. Isn't that what education should be about?
Thank you so much for all being here and for listening and for being willing to engage in these hard conversations. And now we're going to go to a short break.
Felt we were put in boxes of this is your size, this is what you look like. We just want to break those boxes. Whatever you shop on our website, everything is available in every size.
There's girls that email us and guys and say, I have never found something before that has made me want to wear swimwear on the beach. How the product made them feel, honestly, could send you to tears.
I was working as a barber in South East London, having one-on-one conversations every day with black men. I discovered that they were essentially a huge underserved market. I should be able to offer a solution to that problem. All of our products are vegan friendly. That just fresh haircut, left the barbershop feeling is what we want to kind of put in a bottle.
If you care about something enough, you will find a way. And Lord knows the sleepless nights have made it all worth it today, so thank you all so much. So I mentioned before that my background is HR, so I've pretty much worked in every industry known to mankind, starting off my first role looking after the Middle East, would you believe? Yes, that was my first HR job. And as I experienced the highs and lows of being really ambitious, very self-confident, I was always quite self-confident, very resourceful under pressure. Every time I reached that glass ceiling, which actually felt like a concrete ceiling in many of these organisations, I just went to a different organisation, hoping and praying that that would be better. And then when that reached that point of you can't get past, I went to another organisation, and then another organisation, and then I kept going. And sometimes my resourcefulness was actually a hindrance for me because I knew under pressure I can always perform. I kept going and kept going. And now what I realise is when I look back on almost 20 years of experience, because I was always fleeing these organisations from one to another, I was like, just get me out. And then I knew going to the next one, it was like a clock ticking because you knew it was going to come. I was like, if I can just last 2 years, get 2 years on my CV. You know, we talk like that, just get 3 years on my CV, like, and then, you know. But I was always fleeing. And I never stopped to think about what is it that I want. Not what is it do I want to survive these environments that I'm in and this society that I operate in, but what is it that I want, me as Shereen Daniels? What's like my ideal career? Like I still don't know the answer to that, but you know, what I'm saying is I just didn't go through that thought process. You know, what is it that I want my legacy to be? How do I want people to talk about the difference that I made? What is it that I would love to do that has nothing to do with my degrees or the qualifications or, you know, this experience? I just was always making decisions in flight mode. And I was always making decisions from a place of survival. And so the reason why I tell you that is that's not how we always have to do things. You know, and I've forgiven myself a long time ago for some of the decisions that I made because I was operating in flight mode and survival mode. But it's okay to put ourselves first. And sometimes that resourcefulness that gets us out of challenging situations also should be used to give us the courage to silence that voice that tells us who do we think we are. So I could have never planned what the last 2.5 years have looked like for me. I never would have called me doing what I'm doing today, yesterday, last year, you know, I wouldn't have never have called it. But the only thing that I said to myself when I recorded my first video at the end of May in 2020 was let me just do one thing and let me see where that gets me. And that one thing has got me here. So that one thing can get you to wherever you may want to get to or didn't know that you were going to get to, like I didn't know I was going to get here. But just take that time to pause and just act like it's possible every single day. Please just act like it's possible, and then we've got a chance. Thank you so much. And we can now officially bring this conference to an end.